I'm Doris. Sitting here in my cozy North Carolina apartment, looking at the framed recipe card of my late father on the shelf, memories of that fateful day at my mother's house flood back. It was a day that changed everything, a day when the illusion of family crumbled before my eyes. I remember pulling into the driveway that Saturday afternoon, expecting to pick up my last box of belongings. Instead, I was greeted by a scene straight out of a nightmare. A huge vinyl banner hung over the garage reading "Goodbye Freeloader, Don't Come Back." The smell of grill smoke filled the air, and country music blared from a cheap speaker near the patio. Little red and white pennants were strung across the fence, as if this were a summer cookout rather than a public humiliation. I sat there in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, the heat inside almost unbearable. The sunlight bounced off the windshield, and I could hear the laughter even before I opened the door. My Uncle Ben, a heavy drinker who always seemed to have a beer in his hand, staggered into view from the patio. His face was red, and he was so drunk he had no sense of volume. He squinted towards my car and shouted, loud enough for the neighbors down the street to hear, that my mother could finally stop feeding a grown woman who had never made anything of herself. Then, something soft and greasy hit the side of my car and slid down the door. My younger brother Kyle, who always seemed to find joy in my misery, was doubled over laughing beside the cooler. He pointed at the hot dog smeared against the paint and yelled that it was my last free meal. Even the kids from next door joined in the laughter, learning quickly what kind of cruelty was acceptable in this so-called family. My mother, Carol, emerged from the grill with a pair of tongs in one hand. She had that cold, calculated smile she always wore when she thought she was in control. She was dressed in white shorts, gold hoop earrings, and her hair was perfectly styled. Her sunglasses sat on top of her head like a crown. She spread her arms as if she were welcoming an honored guest, not the daughter she was publicly shaming. "Look who finally came to collect her junk," she called out, and a few people laughed harder. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I just walked past all of them and into the house. The music from outside was muffled through the walls, and the kitchen still smelled faintly of the expensive lemon cleaner I had bought because my mother claimed money was tight. In the mudroom, I found my last box on the bench, with a plastic grocery bag on top. A note written in thick black marker said starter kit. Inside were instant noodles, dryer sheets, a half-used bottle of dish soap, and a printed list of apartment complexes in the area. It was so childish, I almost laughed. When I stepped outside again with the box, the backyard crowd fell silent, waiting for the real show. Uncle Ben raised his beer and shouted that my poor mother had carried me long enough. He then made a cruel comment about my late father being ashamed of me. That was the line that cut deep, because he knew exactly where to strike. My father had been gone for 6 years, and Ben knew how much that would hurt. I set the box in my trunk, then took out my phone and took a photo of the banner and the people standing under it. My mother saw me and frowned. "What is that for?" she asked. "Your pity diary?" I looked straight at her and said, "No. For later." Then I got into my car and drove away, leaving them still laughing as I turned the corner. 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with messages from all of them, begging me to call back. But in that moment, they thought they had one. They thought they had just witnessed the end of my humiliation. Little did they know, they had actually captured the moment before their safety net drove away. To understand why this happened, we need to go back a few years. My mother owned a small catering business called Carol's Culinary Creations. On the surface, it seemed like a successful enterprise. The vans had fancy decals, and the office had a nice reception area. My mother dressed well and knew everyone by name, but behind the scenes, it was a mess. Inventory was constantly miscounted, deposits were logged incorrectly, and vendor bills were paid late, always blamed on clerical errors. One of the chefs quit after being blamed for a scheduling disaster that was actually my mother's fault. Insurance paperwork kept lapsing because no one bothered to track renewals. The company's software was held together by old passwords and backup cards that my mother could never remember. I worked remotely as a project manager. I helped small businesses streamline their operations, fix broken processes, and clean up administrative messes. It was a job that paid well, but my family never respected it because they didn't understand it. My mother saw me working from a laptop in a quiet room and thought my work was less real than hers. If she couldn't see me sweating, it didn't count. At first, I only meant to help temporarily. My mother asked me to look over some invoices because the accountant had left suddenly. I fixed one overdue account, then found a contract with incorrect pricing. Then I realized that several event deposits had been recorded without being properly reserved. Every time I fixed one problem, two more popped up. My mother hated admitting she needed help, so she downplayed my work. If I saved a client from canceling because of a mistake in the menu, she would tell people I just answered emails. If I built a spreadsheet to show which dishes were actually profitable, she'd say, she likes to organize things and leave it at that. I paid more than anyone knew. I covered software renewals when the company account declined. I paid the office utility bill once to prevent a shut-off because my mother said she would handle it and then forgot. I advanced money for ingredients when the delivery was due and the company card kept declining. I sent Kyle money for rent twice because my mother said business was slow and she couldn't help him. He never repaid me, and neither did anyone else. My Uncle Ben would come in and out of the business, making deliveries poorly and promising things he couldn't deliver. My grandmother, Edith, would disguise her insults as concern. Carol is just trying to teach you responsibility. Kyle is young. Ben means well when he's sober. I was always the one expected to make excuses for their behavior. The more I helped, the more invisible my efforts became. My mother would make snide comments like, "Must be nice to work in your pajamas," and then an hour later, ask me to rewrite an angry email to a client because she didn't want to sound unprofessional. But one day, I realized that my mother no longer saw me as a hidden support. She genuinely believed that the roof over my head erased every dollar I had put into the business and the family. She thought that because I had never invoiced her, my labor was just an act of love that didn't need to be acknowledged. That was the week I decided to stop trying to be understood and start building a record. I gathered spreadsheets, bank statements, saved texts, and old emails. I built a timeline going back almost 5 years, documenting every time I covered a business shortfall, paid a bill, or fixed a problem. I also started tracking my unpaid labor, which was difficult but possible. The total amount I had contributed was staggering. Business support alone had crossed $90,000, and direct family support pushed it past $100,000. And that was probably an underestimate because unpaid labor is always undervalued when it's done by a family member. Around the same time, a client in North Carolina offered me a long-term contract. It was a great opportunity, with better rates and a bigger scope. I signed the contract without telling anyone. I found a small one-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte, a place where I could finally have some peace. I started moving my things out in small batches so no one would notice. Winter coats, kitchen items I had bought myself, my office monitor, and personal files. By the time my mother cornered me in the kitchen with her official announcement, most of what mattered to me was already gone. She chose a Wednesday morning to tell me that the healthiest thing for both of us was for me to leave by Saturday. She talked about boundaries and personal growth, and how no respectable man would want a woman who still relied on her mother at my age. She said she loved me too much to keep enabling me. I asked her if she wanted me gone or if she wanted a show when I left. Her smirk told me everything. "Maybe both," she said. That was the moment I lost all my guilt. I knew she didn't want resolution, she wanted a spectacle. So, I nodded and said fine. By Friday evening, I had done my quiet work. I removed my card from all the backup billing methods tied to the company systems. I disconnected my login from their scheduling platform. I forwarded 2 client emails without softening my mother's rude language. I sent a client the incomplete file my mother had left in drafts instead of the polished version I would have made. I didn't sabotage anything, I just stopped preventing the consequences. After I left, the silence was telling. For the first 3 days, no one called because they believed their own lies. They thought I would be ashamed and come crawling back. But on Monday afternoon, one client warned that the insurance on the catering vans had expired and suspended future bookings. I knew because my mother had once routed all those notifications through an account she later forgot I managed. I let the warning sit. On Tuesday, the scheduling software went down because the backup card had been removed and the main card declined. Without the software, they were in chaos, trying to juggle delivery dates and client orders through old text messages and handwritten notes. Ben called twice, but I didn't answer. Kyle texted me, "Dad says stop acting crazy and log in." He used the wrong parent because he was panicking. By Wednesday morning, my mother called with a soft voice. "Honey, call me back. There's some confusion with the office account and maybe the client insurance. I think your card might still be attached somewhere." Confusion. That word. Not thanks, not an apology. Just confusion. By Thursday, Ben left a rambling voicemail, saying he didn't mean what he said at the barbecue and asking if I could just help the company get through the weekend. On Friday, Kyle called, his voice stripped of all his usual swagger. He needed money for rent. Mom couldn't help. Business was weird. I sent him a cropped screenshot of some of the payments I had made for him and the business. He went silent for hours, then texted, "What is this?" I answered, "A sample." The next morning, my mother called 6 times before lunch. By the 6th voicemail, she was begging me to explain what I had turned off. "If this is some kind of lesson," she said, "fine. Lesson learned. Call me." That's when I printed the full packet. It was a detailed record of all my contributions, with dates, line items, bank references, and screenshots. At the end, I included the photo I had taken at the barbecue. I printed 2 copies, one for them and one for me. My grandmother, Edith, left me a voicemail after church, saying that bitterness would poison my spirit. She said my mother was under pressure and that counting money after giving it was unladylike. I called her back and said, "You're right. Generosity doesn't keep score. Accounting does." Kyle texted me, "Talk now." I replied, "Monday, noon, public place." My mother answered immediately, "Home." I typed back, "No. You wanted an audience when I left. You can have one when you ask why." We met at a diner near the interstate. My mother and Ben were already there. I sat down, placed the packet on the table, and slid it forward. My mother frowned at the papers. "What is this?" she asked. "The difference between your story and mine," I said. She opened it with confidence, but that confidence disappeared quickly when she saw the total. Ben leaned over and scanned the first page, muttering something under his breath. My mother tried to discredit the numbers, saying they were inflated. I asked her which part, and she jabbed at a software charge, saying it was for the business, not for her. "Yes," I said, "your business." She then tried to use the families help each other excuse. I looked her in the eye and said, "Interesting. When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading, but when you lived off my money and labor, it became family." My mother then changed tactics, saying that even if I had helped, I was still living in her house at my age. I leaned back and calmly said, "If I had paid market rent to a stranger and kept my money away from your business, you would have gone under a long time ago. The only reason you could call me a freeloader is because I loved you quietly." She flipped to the final page and saw the photo. Her posture changed immediately. "You took this for leverage?" she asked. "No," I said. "I took it because I knew you would lie about how bad it was." Then asked, "So, what now? What do you want?" I said, "Nothing. You still don't understand. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here so you can't pretend later that you had no idea what I was carrying. My mother then asked the real question, how much of this can you turn back on? I answered honestly. The office can stay open if you pay the bills today. The van insurance will cost more now because of the lapse. The clients may come back if they trust you. But at least 2 clients are already reconsidering because no one was there to fix your emails. She accused me of enjoying the situation. I told her I would have enjoyed being respected before it got to this point. She then tried to be soft, saying life had been hard since my father died. But I wasn't going to be swayed. I said, we're sitting here like enemies because you threw a party when you thought you no longer needed me. She asked if I wanted an apology. I said no. I wanted distance. She then tried to widen the circle of guilt, bringing up Kyle, Grandma, Ben, the employees, the business. I took out an envelope with names and numbers of accountants, a small business attorney, a bookkeeping service, an insurance broker, and a utility assistance program. Resources, I said. That's all I'm offering. I stood up, and my mother made one last attempt. If you walk out now, don't expect to come back when things turn around. I looked down at her and said, the only reason things ever turned around in that family was because I was standing behind you holding the weight. Then I left. In the months that followed, my mother's business started to fall apart. The office account had to be renegotiated. One of the vans was sidelined after the insurance review. A major client reduced their orders after a couple of mistakes and a rude email my mother sent. One of the employees quit because they were tired of being blamed for things they didn't do. Kyle showed up at my apartment one day, looking exhausted. He admitted that he had been awful to me and that he knew I had been helping more than anyone realized. He said that mocking me had kept the attention off him. I let him stay the night, and in the morning, he left for an interview and texted me to say thank you. My mother's business never fully recovered. She emailed me a transitional support proposal, offering a 90-day contractor arrangement to stabilize the business. She said we could discuss compensation later and that it would help rebuild trust. I laughed when I read it. I replied, I'm not returning. I'm not providing unpaid or deferred labor. Do not contact me for business support again. Any future communication must be respectful and personal only. She replied, so, you will just watch your mother lose everything. I thought about all the years of being taken for granted, the public humiliation, and the cruel words. I wrote back, you're not losing everything because I left. You're losing everything because you built a life that only worked while someone you humiliated kept carrying it. She never replied directly, but the fallout kept coming. My grandmother mailed me an old dish I had left at the house years ago, no note, no apology. It was so absurd, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Looking back, I don't regret leaving. I regret staying so long and confusing being useful with being loved. I regret every time I made excuses for their cruelty. But I will never regret the photo, the silence, the packet, or the distance I've created. I've found a new life here in North Carolina, where my work is respected, and I'm finally free from the toxicity of my old family.